Thanks for joining us online. Everybody give it up for 828 Church Online. We're thankful for you all. Man, what a blessing to be together in this first Sunday in June. Yep, it's starting to feel a little like summer. Not even sure in an air-conditioned building how much longer I can wear a jacket. Help us, Lord. I'm so thankful that you are here. And if it is your first time with us, my name is Ron, and I'm the lead pastor here at 828 Church. And just thankful that you're joining us, and thankful more than anything that, come on somebody, God is joining us already feeling the power of his presence in this house. And what an exciting day too, man. I love the first Sunday of each month, because on the first Sunday of each month we do something here at 828 Church called On-Ramp. We're doing that certainly here in Wilmington. That'll be this evening, and then right there at 828 South, you guys will be having on-ramp immediately after service. And one of the things that I want to point you to, if it's your first time with us, or if you've been here for a minute but you haven't yet connected, in the seat pocket in front of you, there is a connect card. And I always want to direct you to next steps here at 828 Church, because we like to say that we are a high participation church family. And so I want to point you to opportunities to be engaged this summer. We have summer social groups that'll be happening, so an opportunity to connect more deeply with the church family. Not really Bible study driven in the summer, but just activity driven, and opportunities to just be together with somebody. And then, of course, in the fall, we'll kick back up a semester, I should have said, of life groups, and try to go deeper into the areas that God is just directing us. Man, it's a discipleship opportunity. Come on, we want to grow in our walk in relationship with God. You may have never been water baptism. You'll see that there on the screen. Man, if that's you, if you'd like to be water baptized, as people queue up, we just make another plan to do a water baptism. And then you might want to join the dream team. I mentioned already on-ramp. All of that, I would just direct you here at 828 Wilmington and at South to go to the Connections Hub. They can bring you up to speed about all the opportunities to be connected. And the reason I'm taking this extra time on the front today is because I want that for you. I really think it's important to be and to stay connected. We don't want to just check church off the list, come on, but we really want to learn to be a church family. And in this day, I would say more than ever, maybe that's just something that's so important. Anybody that's enjoyed the blessing of being a part of church family, say amen right now. Back a brother up a little bit. It's a big deal. And we are praying. We're always praying and believing. We have folks right now that are just dealing with some different difficulties. We're still praying for Miss Sheila. We're praying for Gigi's mom, and I know most of you don't know who those people are, and some of you do. You know, we live in different spheres of relational connectedness, but if ever you do have a prayer request, please let us know, because there's a space for that too. You can let us know on the Connect card. You can drop us an email, and we put that out to a group of people who faithfully and consistently pray. I think that's important too. And I will tell you, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but the world is kind of a mess. I ain't trying to hate. Look, I love this world that we live in. I say that consistently. You know, like, I look out there and I say, man, there's so much hurt, and it's hectic. There's a lot of division and a lot of strife. Come on, but I still love it. And that's not just because I'm an optimist. I think that there's plenty of spaces still to love, and still to believe, and still to believe the best, but it's kind of hectic. And anytime there are problems that need to be solved, you know what I'm saying? Like, it takes people who are willing to ask the questions, like to pontificate, if you will. And I would say in the kingdom sphere, that's a little bit of prophetic pontification. You understand what I'm saying? Like asking God, hey God, what should we do? How should we respond? And I find it interesting. I shared a bit about this as we were working our way through the faith series, and as I had some opportunities even to speak to pastors. But I mentioned a bit that, you know, sometimes it's just, it's a lot to try to understand and discern how we're supposed to direct our attentions, because people are clearly feeling somewhat desperate. Like, that's a thing, you know, like if there's something that is kind of shared, I guess, emotional status at this moment, it's like, man, what do I do? How do I feel about this? How do I navigate this? I think even in the church, it's not the first time, everybody. If we look at the history of history, we certainly see the rise and falls of civilizations and circumstances. And I'm not predicting the fall of the Western Civ or anything like that. That's not what's happening here. But, that's not where we put our hope anyway, right? But how do we navigate that? Right? How does the church feel? How does the church fit? How do we respond in a moment with so much that's happening? And it causes me to consider kind of the what if, like what if? Now, we're starting a new series today. That's all the setup, see, for the series. You see it right there on your screen. It's up already, right? What if? Now, in this context, what if isn't, so what if we had done this that way or whatever? That's not that, okay? So don't live in that space. This isn't about what's already happened. This isn't what if looking in the mirror. This is, as Ricky said earlier, what if looking through the windshield. Like what if we make this choice going forward? What's that going to be like? You know what I'm saying? Anybody ever do that? Like you're maybe a little bit of a problem solver anyway, like in regards to some other things. You have a little bit of a dilemma. You don't have space in your pantry. What if we reorganize this in this way? Or what, for me, like, I don't know. I'm a good old country boy, so I probably, if I would have been a bit better or maybe a bit more interested in math, maybe could have been an engineer because I like a little bit of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what if? I usually just apply that to things related to my car. Or my car stereo, like what if I added some 6x9s and Rockford Fosgate to push that down-facing subwoofer? What if? How good would that sound? You know what I'm saying? Like my brother, when I was growing up, I have an older brother, Daryl. He was a what-if kind of guy, and he liked to live out his what-ifs. He had a car. He had a 1974 Ford Maverick, which presently now is a classic. Who would have thought? It wasn't then, I'll tell you that for sure. It wasn't a car you're proud to have. And my brother wanted a 4x4, but he didn't have one, didn't have the money to get one. So he had, one day, we were standing there, and he's looking at his car. He said, what if this was a dually? I'm speaking redneck lingo, obviously, here, because no one knows what I'm talking about. That means that instead of 2 tires on the rear, it has 4, like those trucks that have 4 tires in the back. That was his what-if question. And he actually carried through and welded rims together. And he had, so at least that's funny for a few of you. Thank you. The rest of you just continue to look at me like I'm a complete idiot. This story's about my brother. I didn't do it. I love you, Daryl. My other brother, Daryl. Yeah, that's real too. It's those what if. That wasn't the best one, but what if? My father-in-law could have been an engineer, in all honesty. Like, there were times when something wasn't quite right. I remember once I had this older Jeep, and it was clutch. It was a stick shift, and a clutch mechanism broke off the bell housing. Again, I know I might as well be speaking Greek to a lot of you, but it broke off. And I was like, man, I don't have the money to buy a bell housing. And my father-in-law was like, what if we took this and we took it down here to this welder friend of mine and we got him to weld this plate on here and then he could reattach that? I'm just trying to tell you there's some what-if questions, right? Like in the world we live in right now, maybe there's some what-if questions. Like, what if? What if we really followed God? Huh. What if we let God lead? What if we trusted him? What if we believed and applied his word? What if, just pitching it out there, what if we really walked in freedom? Like the freedom that he makes possible. Now, it occurs to me that sometimes when I say things like that, that maybe that bears more explanation. So what if we walk in freedom? Maybe some of you are saying, that sounds great, but what is freedom? Like, what does that look like? Frankly, that song was a bit of an inspiration for this series. So this summer, we're going to take a summer and we're going to ask some what-if questions. And then, so it might be, what if I really surrendered my heart to him? And then the follow-up, the platform for the message that will be spoken on that particular week will be, because this is what that looks like. This is what it looks like when I surrender, right? When I surrender my heart to God. In Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 15, Paul said this, ever since I first heard of your strong faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for God's people everywhere, speaking obviously to the church in Ephesus, Paul said, I've not stopped thanking God for you. I pray for you constantly. Now, at this point in my life, Sandy living in a bit of a pastoral role, obviously, I appreciate this because that's frequently how I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? I think, man, I love and appreciate how faithfully many of you are just working to follow God and find your way to his will for you. And I pray for you. I do, and I do pray for you. But then in verse 17 he says this, but I do more than think. In other words, I don't just thank God, I ask. I ask the God of our Master, Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, to make you intelligent and discerning in knowing him personally. Your eyes focused and clear so that you can see exactly what it is he's calling you to do. Grasp the immensity of this glorious way of life he has for Christians. Oh, the utter extravagance, he goes on to say, of his work in us who trust in him. Endless energy, boundless strength. Now, this prayer, Stephen, makes me aware, the way that he prays it, that even people who know God, who maybe have an elementary faith, might struggle in what it looks like to not live lost. Like in this world, it's pretty easy to live lost. Even if you're on your way to heaven, like there's this element of understanding regarding how God wills for us to navigate this world that requires a deeper look at the heart of God. And now I think these major discipleship principles, clearly it's possible. What if? What if I apply his word or walk in his will or apply grace to my heart, or what would that look like? What would that live like? And an easy point of connection to this communication would be just to go backwards real quick to the series that we just landed. So we just finished the faith series here at 828 Church. And I will tell you, as a pastor and primary preacher, we have some other people that are a part of our teaching team who do a phenomenal job. But as the person who most consistently stands on the stage, man, and these series just come. You know, like sometimes I go back and I look at the app, Chris, and I'm like, man, we did that series on possibilities or next level or all those different things. Grace, we did a whole series on grace, and all these series we've done. And sometimes it's a little hard, honestly, from my heart, because I'm thinking, did we really get that? You know, and I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about me too, right? Did we really get that? Did that impact us in the way that God's word should, in a way that God's word could? Because it just comes, right? It comes so quickly. And when you think about this series we just finished, it was 6 weeks. We talked about faith, what it looks like to have faith and to live by faith. But what does that look like? What are some things that would identify a life that was lived by faith? I was this week reading from the book of Habakkuk. It's a real book, everybody. That's real. Habakkuk. Habakkuk. There you go. I'm a little proud of myself right now. I know I just saw it on that sheet of paper, but I can spell Habakkuk, at least for the rest of this week. I'll probably forget by next week. But Habakkuk lived in a time not that dissimilar to our own. I mean, Brandon, the world was going crazy. Book of Habakkuk, it precedes the books like the book of Daniel. It was in a time when the people of God had lost their way. Oof, they were living lost, and they had more assimilated to the cultures that were around them. The other nations around them were also living incredibly lost. Their morality was at an all-time low, and they had disobeyed, even in many cases, not just marginalized the voice of God, but forgotten it. That was Habakkuk's time. And Habakkuk was going to God. He was like, look, when are you going to do something about this? Chapter 1. It's only 3 chapters long. You can read it later if you want. And he's just going to God. He said, look, I mean, this is terrible. And when are you going to do something about it? And then God spoke up to him. He said, I'm about to do something about it, but you're not going to like my plan. Because there's going to be some pretty hard reset that's about to happen here. About to do a hard reset. And he prophesied to and through Habakkuk about how the Chaldeans were going to come, and eventually the Babylonians would come, and it was going to be tough. And now, Habakkuk's like, oh my goodness, that wasn't the answer I was hoping for. I was thinking, some quick and immediate deliverance, right? That's what I was hoping for. And then Habakkuk said, well, what do we do? What do I tell the people who are actually faithful to you? Like, what do I tell those guys that are actually still trying to live according to your word and your will, right? And here's what God said to Habakkuk. He said, verse 4, he said, I'll read it all. The last part's the part that makes this point, but it's all important. He said, look at the proud. They trust in themselves. and their lives are crooked. But the just shall live by faith. His retort to Habakkuk's question was, the just will live by faith. What do we do? What do I tell them? What's the plan? What is your will for those of us who would still remain faithful in spite of all of this brokenness and your impending judgment? Like, what do we do? And what God said was, the just will live by faith. So let's try to unpack that a bit. In this first week of the What If series, let's unpack a little bit what it would look like. What if? This is a good time to have a goatee. I look all contemplative. What if? What if the just live by faith? What if we lived out our faith? What would that look like? Well, I'll give you a few. Okay, so this is kind of how the series is going to be, certainly how today is going to be. Number one, I think if we live out our faith, what that would look like, faith lived out, looks like faithfully following God. That's what it looks like. Looks like faithfully following God. I know that seems a little bit obvious, but it's important to point out because we can't say we're living by faith if we don't faithfully follow God. I say it all the time. I'm wearing it out. I'm going to keep saying it. But God's word has to have final authority. First and final. Not just final, but first and final authority in our lives. What's our go-to for instruction about what's right and what's wrong, right? And how we're meant to live in relationship to other people is the Bible, everybody. What does it look like if we live by faith? It looks like faithfully following God. That's going to require some digging in. Jesus himself said over and over, he said, if you love me, if you believe in who I am, who I say I am, follow my instructions, keep my commandments. That was Jesus. Those are the things Jesus said over and over in the Word. He referred to that. He wasn't saying prove you love me by obeying. He was saying if you love me, you're going to be motivated to follow me. That's what loving me looks like. That's what that looks like, right? It doesn't look like, hey, I love you, God, but I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to disregard your instructions. That's not what that looks like. So when we say faithfully following God, what we mean by that is faithfully following God. What if we did that? How much difference would that make? I'm going to go with a lot. Faith lived out, here's another point I think is powerfully important, but faith lived out won't be the most popular path. Just give you a little heads up. It's not going to be, in certain circles it'll be a good Twitter post, but by and large, it's not going to get pushed forward. Jesus himself called it the narrow way. Matthew 7:13-14, narrow is the path, he said, that leads to life, and wide is the way that leads to destruction. Again, I just figured it would be good if we quoted Jesus a lot. I'm going to go for that. We'll quote Jesus a lot this summer in the What If series. What if we lived by faith? We would faithfully follow God, and it wouldn't be the popular path. It's not a surprise. We're not shocked. Narrow is the way that leads to life. Wide is the way that leads to destruction. Everybody's feeling happy right now. I can feel it on you. 1 Timothy 4:1-2 says this, the Spirit makes it clear that as time goes on, some are going to give up on the faith and chase after demonic illusions put forth by professional liars. These liars have lied so well for so long that they've lost their capacity for truth. Again, welcome to our world. That's just kind of where we are right now. The world is just so broken and deceived and confused that it believes its own lie, right? Be careful. God's trying to help us this morning, right? Be careful, because to live out your faith means to faithfully follow God, and we don't have to live like that. Like, this doesn't have to be our destiny. We don't have to relate like that. We don't have to raise our kids like that. Come on, we don't have to live in business like that. Every part of who we are and how life lives, God's got something to say about it. Y'all back me up a little bit. Y'all's quiet today. Come on. Preacher preaches faster when he gets an occasional shout out. I don't even need a lot, just a little. Okay, you scared me. Well, that was good, though. Here's another tough takeaway. I'll just call it that. I don't think I've ever said it that way. Here's another tough takeaway. Compromised convictions shouldn't be Christianity's most common expression. Yeah, I sweated a little bit when I put it in my notes last night. I ain't even trying to lie to you, because that applies to me. I wasn't even worried about you. We're all trying to figure out how to navigate it. Nobody likes to just be different for the sake. Well, some people do, but I'm not that guy. That's not my Enneagram. That's not my personality temperament. I'm not trying to be different for the sake of being different. I want to follow God and His will and His word, and I still believe it's true. And compromised conviction shouldn't be Christianity's most common expression. That's not what this is supposed to look like. Psalm 1:1-3. How blessed is the one who does not follow the advice of the wicked or stand in the pathway with sinners or sit in the assembly of scoffers. Instead, he finds pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. He meditates on His commands day and night. That's what it looks like. Okay, are you hearing me right now? I'm trying to let the Lord speak. This is the counsel of God's word speaking to us about our lives and how they're meant to live. And understand this, we can't live this out if we don't learn it. Look what it says. Instead, he finds pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. He meditates on His commands day and night. You can't set the word aside and live it. It's not possible. That's not just for a few radical, faithful people. We're all, as Christ's kids, meant to learn His word and live it. That's what it looks like. What does it look like to live by faith? Learn that word and live it. Believe it. It's life. It's life. Even in this season. Look, we're going to keep loving folks. I'll come to that in a minute. But God's word is our directive. And then, verse 3, the one who does that is like a tree planted by flowing streams, planted by the waters. It yields its fruit at the proper time. It's called rock solid. That's what that is. We could preach that too, right? The wise man built his house on it. Come on, somebody. Rock. Oof. Yeah, I want to preach that, but I won't. No quit or give up in the life lived by faith. It's a life of steadfastness. It's determination with discernment. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't just be mean enough or mad enough. We'll be out there fighting over the wrong things, everybody. I'm not talking about just being like, I'm going to defend God. I'm talking about following God. Live by faith. This isn't something that makes for a Instagram or Facebook post. This is how life lives in the trenches, right? Where battles and victories are won for God. And our fight isn't against flesh. I know sometimes it feels like that the enemy is fleshly because we have to make our stand and statements on some level. But listen, this is a spiritual war, and live it there. Dig into who God is and love people in their brokenness, not hurt or hate. That's pretty good. Determination with diligence marks the life lived by faith. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of Jesus, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Come on, just keep chasing Jesus and do your thing. What if we lived by faith? Well, that would mean faithfully following God. The second bit of that to unpack, I think, is this, that faith lived out looks like joy in every season. Whew, that's going to be a little easier to preach. But it's true. And it's important. Did I say happy? You know, joy is one of the things I most often preach about, right? Trust, joy, those are sort of things that I consistently bring up again and again and again. But I believe joy is just so important that we embrace the joy that God gives us. Romans 15:13. I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace in believing as you trust in Him, right? I mean, that's how that works. That's faith attaches us. In some sense, even we could say it releases God's peace and joy in our lives. When we don't live by faith, peace and joy are beyond our grasp. We just can't find them. Faith, believing in who God is. I'm backing up to the last series. Believing in who God is, the promises He's made to us, and the love He has for us releases peace and joy in our lives in every season. That's what it looks like to live by faith. You're not going to panic. If you find yourself consistently panicking, all right, then get back with God and say, okay, I'm pretty sure this is not what it looks like to live by faith. And I was thinking it a little bit, and then the pastor, he was like chatting it up on Sunday. And he even brought some scriptures to back up the point, so I feel pretty good about it. You know what I'm saying? And I see people of faith like, hey, hear me now. Life can be heavy, hard, and hurtful. And a right response to that is often to feel heavy. Right? I get it. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I feel that. I know that. I understand that. That's real. And you will not feel happy. And there are a lot of things that make me feel way less than happy. And in fact, if you are happy about those things, I'm a bit concerned about you on a different level. Okay? But I'm saying in the middle of that, there's a place to go with God that will release peace and joy in your life anyway. Come on, that's the most powerful thing about being a God follower right there. This is worth it right here, people. And I saw that. I have seen that lived out in the lives of people who went through difficulty. I share often about my grandma on my mom's side, her Granny Mary, we called her, came to Jesus when she was 19 and had a tough run, right? I mean, a lot of things were difficult for her. She raised 10 kids, but she had 13. So she lost 3 little ones, and they just endured a lot of difficulty and lived a life of ministry for 50 years. Holy smokes. But that lady was the quintessence of joy. And I would have thought it was genetic if I didn't know that that's not how that works, right? Because my mom had the same capacity for joy, even when it was difficult, when the money was tight and things were not necessarily always going well, and my dad was struggling in his own walk and relationship with God, and it was just loss. There was lots of seasons of significant loss and challenge, and yet I saw this irrepressible joy, and it impacted me because I recognize where it comes from. It comes from a tight and right relationship with the only God that can give it. In fact, David, who also had some ups and downs for sure, wrote in Psalm 16:11, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy." I do this whole teaching called the Top 10 Most Common Joy Thieves. It's one of my favorites, frankly. And number 1 on the top 10 most common joy thieves is absence from the presence of God. You can skip the other ones. I could just give you the synoptic version. Hang tight with Jesus, and in spite of all the other things that might rob you of your joy, you still going to have joy because of hanging tight with Jesus. Number 3, a life lived by faith will be marked by hope. Hope marks the life lived by faith. It's going to hit your screen. Hope. I know those are similar, but they're not exactly the same. And sure, it's a hectic season. I mentioned that a minute ago, and I think for people who are trying to follow God or believe in God or live into this church space, you look at how broken the world is, and again, you'd be like, I don't even know where I'm supposed to stand. Am I supposed to keep believing? What do we do? And you know what I'm saying? Like back to Habakkuk, I mentioned a minute ago, like what in the world? But I'll remind you that the prophecies are also positive in many cases. Like Joel said, in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. That's what God said. I'm just saying there's plenty of places to be hopeful, even in regards to our world. Like I know that for a lot of folk who live in the space that I live vocationally, they will be like, man, I don't even know. And there's a whole lot of quit, right? But for me, I'm like, what an exciting season. I'm not glad for the hurt. I'd have to be lying to you just to act like I was. I'm not. But I'm thinking, I'm glad that I found my way to God a long time ago, because navigating the stormy seas sure do seem a lot more doable with God. You know what I'm saying? Like when Jesus is in the boat, everybody. Like one of my all-time favorite stories is a story from Matthew 8. So remember that one? There was twice when something similar to this happened. But in Matthew 8, Jesus got real tired because in his humanity, he did get tired, and he poured himself out consistently. People was following him everywhere. So he told his close followers, his disciples, he said, hey, get in a boat. Let's go to the other side. And then he immediately took a nap. That's something I'd like to learn from Jesus right there, man, how to take a nap. And he fell asleep in the boat, and then they hit a storm, like a real serious, like a real deal storm came up. Now, there's a couple of things in here. Number one, they were doing what God said do when God said do it, and they still hit a storm. So don't get caught playing the blame game and think, well, because I'm having a hard time, I must not be following God. Okay, it was a storm. Storms happen on the sea, everybody. That's what happens. And they hit a big bad storm, and it must have been tough because most of these guys were sailors. They were fishermen and people who were familiar certainly with the sea, and they were probably doing everything they could. Whenever I envision this story, like I don't know, I'm hoping that they'll play this out in The Chosen because I'd like to see it. But man, I mean, these dudes like he was this big burly dude with a serious real deal. He had a Brandon beard, you know what I'm saying? He had a real big beard, and he had on a flat, like they were wearing rain gear, and his was like big yellow hat with it was pulled up like that, and water's pouring everywhere, and water's running off his beard, and these other dudes, and the waves are coming over, and they're dipping for everything they got, and some dudes back here on the rudder, and they're working every way they can to save this boat. And they know they're just moments from scuttling the ship, you know, it was really a boat, and they're going down, and then somebody said, where is Jesus, you know, and then he's asleep, which is impressive. Just pitching that out there, too, that he was sleeping through the storm. And so one of them went and woke him up, and they prayed this incredible prayer. They said, oh, God, if you could just wake up and rescue us, that would be awesome. No, they said, we're going to die. What are you doing? All right? It wasn't even a good prayer. We're going to die. And Jesus stood up. He's bone dry in my version of the story. That's just the way I see it. He was bone dry. And he's like, man, how is it you don't have any faith? They had already seen a lot of miracles, right? How is it you have no faith? I mean, I get the storm, but I'm right here. And then he looked at the winds and the waves, and he said, shh. And the sea went, and the word says they were immediately ashore. And the disciples were like, still dripping wet. They're soaking wet. They're at the shore going, well, we should have thought of that sooner. Come on, y'all. They didn't even pray a good prayer. You don't even have to pray a great prayer. Some of the best prayers are just, God, help. Right? This is hard. This isn't fair. I don't know what to do. Just make sure you pray to God and believe in who he is. Hope, pardon, this is a pun, and I think was once the title of a movie, but hope really does float. It's like what keeps you on top of even a stormy sea. There was a story years ago all over the national news media about a cargo ship that had got a hole in the hull but didn't sink. You know why it didn't sink? Had a buoyant cargo. Man, I'm going to be so punny right now, but with Jesus in your boat's going to float. That's what living by faith looks like. It doesn't look like a stormless life. It just looks like a boat that still floats, everybody. The fourth thing I'll toss out there is this. A life lived by faith. What does it look like? So what if we actually live by faith? The just will live by faith. What if we actually did that? Well, the fourth thing is it looks like generosity. And that's something. Like it doesn't look like, oh, woe is me, a recession is coming, I'm going to hoard what I have. A belated happy birthday to Miss Francis. Friday. Everybody shout out Miss Francis back there. She's in the house today. Was her birthday on Friday. And I've watched this lady live generously in seasons of lack, and that's impressive. What I'm saying to you is not fear but faith, not hoarding but helping, believing that we live in a different economy. Hebrews 13:16 says this, make sure you don't take things for granted and go slack in working for the common good. Share what you have with others. God takes particular pleasure in acts of worship, a different kind of sacrifice that take place in a kitchen, in a workplace, and on the streets. And in a season just before COVID, when Miss Francis lost her mom, and I asked her if I could share this story, and she lost her job, and finances got to be tight, this lady just kept giving. Sometimes she'd bringing me a cake I wish she wouldn't. You can stop that, help us, Lord. Y'all like, Pastor, you gaining some weight. Talk to Francis. She's partially responsible, help us, Lord. She's always blessing me and the first lady she likes to call Karen. Yeah, but your generosity, like she's out there collecting bicycles and clothes and car seats for our ladies that are in the Tithes program or people in need, just constantly find a way to give. When I was a kid, the aforementioned mom, my mom, also named Mary, we didn't have a lot. I've shared around here often. I mean, we lived in a house that was 900 square feet. That would be a tiny apartment, you know what I'm saying? Like, we just didn't have a lot. But my mom, while she was working her way through college, so I'm the youngest of 5, and late in her collegiate career, she went back to college. She was always already working. But she worked at a human development center, which was a home for people with special needs. Very large home, still there in the place that I grew up, that area. And she was working there. We had a special needs sister. Most of you know that. So she already had a bit of an affection and a heart, certainly for folk. But consistently, in our 900 square foot home, my mom would bring people home. On the weekends, a lot of those kids, I mean, it was a 7-day-a-week live-in facility, but sometimes some of the kids, their parents would come and get them for the weekend. But there were kids that were just completely orphaned. And my mom would bring those special needs kids home. She didn't have a van, but she would figure out a way. She'd take a couple of extra kiddos and sit in the back seat with someone who was confined to a wheelchair and bring them home. In our little 900 square foot house, you know what I'm saying? Like, we would all pile in one room so that someone with special needs could have someone, and no one ever complained about it. Like, there was a generosity, you know, because that's what living by faith looks like. It doesn't look like, oh man, I was having breakfast with a friend this week, and I said, you know, one of the things the Lord spoke to me is we're looking at what the economy might be over the next year or two. Sure, be wise stewards, but come on, we live in a different economy, somebody. If you've been feeling afraid or panicked, I'd push pause on that. How are we going to do it? Well, the just shall live by, everybody help me out right now, shall live by faith. 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6 through 8. This is the point. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able, look at this though, to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. I'm just saying, God's got us, and if He doesn't, we're done anyway. He does. He's got us. Come on, somebody. Y'all with me? Okay. All right. I hope I'm curtailing some worry in the house today. In everything, through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which literally transcends human understanding, will place a guard over your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. That's how Paul told the Philippians to approach it. Am I telling you I never worry? No, I'm not telling you I never worry. Help us, Lord. I'm just telling you what I do when I do. That's all I'm saying. The worship team at South and here in Wilmington going to join me on the stage. I'm going to land this thing. Yeah. What if? What if we lived by faith? What would that look like? Well, lastly, it would look like loving in this lost and broken world. Love marks the life lived by faith. That's my last point this morning. 5. You know, we're called to be image bearers. What does it look like? What does that look like? We're a reflection of who God is. You want to figure out what it looks like to love in this lost and broken world? Go read about what Jesus did. Start with the book of John. It's a good, easy read, right? It's so cool, too. Storytelling by John. And just see the way Jesus interacted with people and how He loved people. That's what it looks like. You're hurting. You feel like hiding. Go love somebody. I said that last week. That was one of my ways, right, to keep heart, was to love people. I get it. People. I said it last week, people. My favorite thing about pastoring is people. The hardest thing about pastoring is people. I said it. I meant it. I ain't taking it back. Stop loving people and you'll start dying. Go find somebody to love. You think your stuff's hard? And it very well may be, but find somebody to love. Walk through the hallway at the hospital and find somebody to encourage, and you'll end up encouraging yourself. That's what it looks like to live by faith. The life lived by faith will draw on God's capacity to love. That's what's cool. What's cool about that is we don't have to do it on our own. People say to me sometimes, man, you're just the most loving dude. Man, I'm just a conduit. You know what I'm saying? Now, I got some people in my life that are pretty easy to love. McKinley's like one of the easiest people to love on the planet. Come on, Carly, back me up a little bit. Judah and Grace. Karen was hard early, but it's gotten better over time. Hell of a... I love you, sweet girl. That's my wife of 34 years. Listen, I said it last week. I'll say it again. I'm hard to love sometimes. I get it. But that's what it looks like. I don't love because it's easy or because I'm never going to get hurt or everybody going to do me right. It's a faith move. That's a faith move. Because God's trustworthy. I've been crucified with Christ. Last scripture, Galatians 2:20. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I live now in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me. There you go. And gave himself for me. So one last what if. What if behind the scenes in your life, I'm not talking about you individually right now, what if God was working in old time and you didn't even know it? Like in the middle of unbelievable brokenness, you were basically otherwise abandoned. Maybe by yourself. Like sometimes we're the one that abandoned us. But God didn't. He's still been steady working. Romans 8:28. Somebody should name a church after that verse. For we know that in all things God works together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. God's always working. He's been working behind the scenes in your life too. Think about it for a second. Could you do it just for a second? Could you just think a little bit about all the times God came through and rescued your behind? I see some smiles right now. People are like, oh, you know you're right, though. That's the most right thing the preacher said all day right there. Holy smokes. I was destined for disaster, and I didn't even think about it. What if you could see the unbelievable, passionate pursuit of God after your heart, always intending to add you to the royal family? That's what he's been planning, still planning, regardless of where you are today. He's always been planning to make you royalty, sons and daughters of the King of creation. What if? What if we could see that? What if? What if I live the life God wills? What if I follow through? What if I choose the path he's planned and trust that his word is true? Without his help, so far, no good. A mess is what I've made. I've never really given all to God, just a few simple prayers I've prayed. Yet in the life of those who've trusted his voice, I see a peace I've never known. A joy that has stayed beyond my reach, found in God alone. So to God I'll go. No more what ifs. I'm just thankful his love chased me down. The King of creation for my coronation offers a robe and a crown. You're good, God. You are good, God. And I pray that you would move and motivate us to believe that, to believe in you, and to live by faith.